Tragedy breeds creativity. In 1986, the world watched in horror as the worst nuclear accident in human history unfolded. An event that has never occurred on this planet before. The Vladimir I. Lenin nuclear power plant in Chernobyl, Ukraine burst open following a failed safety test, spilling nuclear radiation into the world and destroying nearly 100 kilometers square area around it. It is in this horror that we find the setting for the STALKER series, along with a healthy dose of inspiration from the novel Roadside Picnic, as well as the 1979 Tarkovsky masterpiece film of the same name. So join me now as we see what the zone has in store for us.
I said come in, don't stand there.
The first game in this series is STALKER: Shadow of Chernobyl, released in 2007 following a turbulent development cycle. Like so many mid-2000s games, you begin as an amnesiac, rescued from a truck crash with only a mysterious tattoo on your arm as identification, leading others to call you the Marked One. You're immediately introduced to the world of the Zone, a surreal version of the actual zone of exclusion around Chernobyl. However, in the game's timeline, there was a second explosion in 2006, and this one was far less destructive and far more weird. The zone isn't just a nuclear wasteland. Something about the second explosion caused more than just radiation to spill out, and now the fabric of reality is starting to tear open, causing bizarre anomalies to form and the creation of otherworldly, almost magical items called artifacts to form. These artifacts can have strange effects, like letting you run forever or recover your health, though often there's side effects like background radiation or less resistance to fire. Artifacts only form in and around anomalies, so in order to acquire these prized possessions, you'll need to brave fields of localized lightning, spurts of flame, or extreme gravity, just to name a few. You'll run into all of these as you make your way through STALKER's story, following the Marked One as he attempts to recover his memories, while following on the trail of a group of explorers that manage to penetrate all the way to the center of the zone. Along the way, you'll meet and interact with the various factions that have taken up residence. Everything from free stalkers and mercenaries to paramilitary groups, environmentalists, and even deranged cultists. Each group has their own outlook on the zone and the other factions, and choosing who to throw in with can affect your access to certain parts of the game.
Great work, Marked One. We have the documents at last. I need to have a look at them now, and maybe I'll work out how to get north. While I do that, if you have problems with money, you can fight at the arena.
On the surface, STALKER may appear to be a shooter with light RPG elements, but the fact is that it is an RPG through and through. The core of the game is exploring the twisted world of the zone, finding treasures and even magical items and improved weapons to progress, complete with dungeons to delve into and monsters to fight. You'll need these powerful items, since weapons and armor break down with use and there's no way to repair them. In the later sections of the game, it's not uncommon for your guns to seize up, and you have to scramble for replacement parts taken from foes. Combat itself is something of a mixed affair. Weapons can feel floaty, and enemies can act like sponges, seemingly shaking off dozens of rounds of ammo before going down. Headshots become necessary, especially in the final chapters, where heavily armed foes won't even feel lower powered rounds. Weapons are notoriously inaccurate even when aiming, and there's various animations that can make enemies temporarily invincible. This has given STALKER a reputation as being brutally difficult, and this may turn off some before they can adjust to the jankiness of it all.
We've got to get out of here quick.
Speaking of difficulty, I should address now the rumor of the difficulty setting STALKER has. Despite what nearly everyone, including most other reviewers, will say, no, the game is not easier on the harder difficulties. It's not exactly clear where this idea came from, save for the masochistic nature of STALKER fans themselves. There is a strange difficulty curve in STALKER, where the beginning of the game provides you with the worst weapons and armor imaginable. Then by the middle you are fairly overpowered, only for the end to be a torturous slog through hell. Strangely, while capturing footage of this entire series, I actually discovered that Shadow of Chernobyl is probably the easiest of the three, despite playing it on the highest difficulty. Take that as you will. The other thing to address with Stalker is the roughness of the game. I mentioned before that the development was troubled, and that's an absolute understatement. This game was nearly cancelled more than once, and below I'll link to a documentary about the different beta versions, as well as an article talking about how THQ barely saved it. For the time, it was ambitious, not only being one of the first true shooter RPG hybrids, but also being one of the first truly open world shooters, barely beating Far Cry 2 by a few months. This ambition was not without cost, and Stalker is, especially without mods, a buggy mess at times. If you're lucky, all that'll go wrong is NPCs getting stuck on the environment, or a sound clip issue. But more often than not, you'll have problems like quests not completing properly, characters clipping through the world, or, as I had a few times during recording, just crashes to desktop.
Not bad. Some pretty good stuff you've got there. Now that's the way to go.
Visually, Stalker is in a weird spot. There is never really going to be nostalgia for mid-2000s games, but for the time, Stalker was pushing the visual boundaries. The lighting is the clear standout here. Dynamic shadows do a wonderful job of enhancing the atmosphere. And while the textures are muddy, Stalker is a game that works best when you look at the big picture, and the levels do remain memorable even now. The biggest issue though is the NPCs you'll be interacting with. Character lip syncing always reminded me of the Canadians from South Park, and while there's a lot of detail in how the characters look, animations for both NPCs and the player yourself are stiff and really weird. In a similar vein, the audio has its ups and downs. Combat noises lack any sort of punch and bass, and it's not surprising that most mods will replace the default audio. A big, bombastic gunfight ends up sounding like a bunch of kids playing with pop guns. Voice acting, or at least for the English, is very bad, and most hardcore players will recommend using the original Russian audio clips instead, since the English lines have that "who's in the office right now" sound to them. Finally, the music is a standout, as it's all very creepy and atmospheric, pairing well with the visuals and the overall tone of the zone.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Regardless of its issues, the single greatest selling feature of Stalker remains its atmosphere. There is something undeniably intriguing about the world of the zone. The random assorted monuments to the failed Soviet Union, the industrial complexes, and scattered remains of the towns and villages wiped out by the blasts. It's a minor look into the apocalypse, one both shockingly realistic and yet surreal and unnatural. From its dark and foreboding undergrounds to the wide and open fields, the zone is just begging you to explore, inviting you inward with tales of treasure and horror. Stalker is a game best taken as a sum of all of its parts, and that sum is a wonderful experience that I still treasure today. There are few other games that not only blend its RPG and shooter elements this well, but also the tone and atmosphere. It's a truly unique experience, and it remains a standout not only for horror shooters, but for Eurojank in general. It was successful enough to warrant a sequel, so join me next time as we clear the air on Stalker Clear Sky.